Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhart. We often say that Pizza Quest is as much about the quest as it is about the pizza, and we celebrate that quest wherever we find it. And this time, we celebrate it in the realm of sports, basketball in particular, which happens to be my favorite sport. I love a well-played game of basketball as much as I love a perfectly crafted pizza, or a great Philly cheesesteak, or even a proper Caesar salad, my all-time favorite food. But basketball is the perfect game. Our guest today is former professional basketball player, a Southern California hoops legend, a star at Duke University under the mentorship of Coach Mike Krzyzewski, and now an author, a motivational speaker, a coach and trainer of the new generation of rising athletes, Ricky Price. His book, Celebrate Your Wins, tells us his story, including the highs and the lows of a life driven by a quest for basketball greatness. Along the way, Ricky had to learn some difficult life lessons, which ultimately led him to create Game-Ready Skills and Development, where he imparts the hard-won wisdom of his journey to talented young athletes, and also adults, built upon what he calls his 5 pillars of success. I'll let Ricky explain what those pillars of success are and how his basketball journey led him to find meaning and purpose, and ultimately his mission in life. Ricky Price, welcome to Pizza Quest.
Hello, my good people. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I've really enjoyed reading your book, and I want to hear all about those 5 pillars of success and your program at Game-Ready Skills and Development. But first, as a longtime fan and follower of Duke basketball, I really want to hear about what it was like being coached by quite possibly the greatest basketball coach of all time, the legendary Coach K, and how it impacted your life.
Well, I got to tell you, I've been doing podcast interviews for quite a long time now, and there's not a time when that question is not asked.
Yeah.
It's either first, second, or third in this interview with Spurs, but I love it.
Well, you're part of a very, small club of people who had the privilege and honor of being coached by him.
And it was an honor. I tell people all the time that I believe that Coach K is the best coach in all of team sports. I mean, that's a tall order with guys like John Wooden out there, Nick Saban, Pat Riley, Phil Jackson. But Coach just had a really special niche, for coaching at a high level in college, and then obviously coaching, for USA basketball and winning several gold medals in that lane as well.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Coach is comparable to other coaches in terms of X's and O's. It's not like he puts together or draws a play that's better than the next coach. I think
that's not where the magic is then, huh?
That's not where the magic is. I think his magic comes from his ability to motivate his players. He is an incredible motivator. And I'm talking about, selling water to a well, ice to an Eskimo, basketball to a basketball player. He just has a way of getting you to play at your best and highest level. And you're talking about Zion Williamson, to Kyrie Irving, to Jason Tatum, to Christian Laettner, to Grant Hill, to Jason Williams. When you got these lists of players playing at the highest that they can possibly play, you get a really good product. And he was able to do that for more than 3 decades.
Ricky, how does he do it? What is it that he does that kind of squeezes every ounce of potential, from his I guess you have to say his students.
I think it's the way he relates to his teams and his players. I mean, he's a player's coach. I mean, if you're a big time basketball player, there's no reason why you shouldn't want to go to Duke University. And that was the thought process when he was leading the program. And then, obviously he was able to take that to the next level, as I mentioned before, with USA basketball, with some of the best players in the world. And some of those sidebar conversations that he would have with me and other players on the team, telling you specifically what he needed from you at that time and overall, were just incredible nuggets that you could take and use. And it gave you confidence to play, at the highest level. And as a result, he was we were able to have great success.
And I know that he has, remained a mentor in your life, both, during those years and then beyond, and everything that's happened since. So we want to kind of explore that a little bit with you. Um, I know I'll just, speaking of Coach K, the other thing that you mentioned about him coaching the Olympic teams, and those were like dream teams of some of the greatest players of all time. And professional players are notoriously, I think, difficult for college coaches to coach, and yet he had their respect as well. It seemed like, from as an observer, from somebody outside watching the games, that these players who really knew as much about basketball as anybody seemed to, really heed his leadership.
Well, I think, like all coaches, they want to coach at the highest level. Coach teetered and flirted with, coaching in the NBA, for a long time. I remember there were grumblings about him leaving for Portland, for Boston, for the LA Lakers. I mean, constantly NBA teams were trying to get him to coach in the NBA. And so, that fix, probably that itch had to be scratched somehow.
Yeah.
But what coach did was, instead of coaching an NBA team, he was able to land an even better job. Well, let me coach an NBA team with the best players in the world on it,
Yeah.
which is essentially the Olympic team, the USA men's basketball team. And so you talk about getting your fix. Not only are you coaching NBA players, you're coaching the best players in the world, but only for a short amount of time, not for a full 82 game season, but for a couple weeks during the summertime, a couple off years, during a decade. And to me, it was the ultimate fix for that.
Yeah. But it's a high wire act, because you also, if you fail coaching the best players in the world, then that could be a big splashdown.
Well, he did. I mean, he didn't always win. That first year, I think in '03 it was, I think they won the bronze medal in the World Championships or the Olympics, one of the two. And, people were like, what is going on? This college coach experience is not going to work. But he implemented, some of the same principles, that he taught us at Duke, and he got guys to buy in. And before you know it, he turned things around. And 4 gold medals later, USA is back on top in dominance in a world that's ever catching up in the world of basketball, and it was really good to see.
And I think another part of his legacy is the success stories of the people who he trained. His mentees are now mentors for others, including yourself. So there's quite a number of coaches out there that are part of the Coach K tree, so to speak. And what could be a better legacy than that?
Well, as a basketball trainer, which is what I've done for the past 14 years, um, there's a sort of legitimacy. When you come to me and you ask me about my resume as a basketball player and why I should coach your son or daughter and
Yeah.
train him to learn basketball skills, it's an easy conversation when you can say that you played at Duke, you played 9 years professionally, and that your mentor and coach was Coach K. I think when parents hear that, are sold.
Right.
When do I sign up?
Right.
So,
Right.
being a Duke basketball player, coming from that coaching tree, if you will, gives me instant credibility, in that field.
Well, this, which kind of brings us to your program. You've got this, this program that you implement right here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we both live. Um, and can you talk a little about it's built around this concept that you call the 5 pillars? Are these things that you learned from Coach K? And I guess we should also speak about other mentors that you've had, because he's not the only mentor in your life. You had some great coaches when you were coming up as a legendary player in California, with in the AAU circuit and in your high school level. So you had the benefit of a lot of really great mentoring along the way. Is this where this concept of the 5 pillars came from?
Absolutely. Well, it's well documented that Coach K built his program on 5 principles: trust, care, pride, collective responsibility, and communication. Well, in my travels as a basketball player, I was able to develop my own, pillars, or principles. I like to call them pillars, the game ready pillars to success. And really, these are the things that kind of propelled me to who I am and how I think, why I operate. It's my why and it's my how. And so, it derives from what I learned from Coach K, but it really specifies who I am and what I'm about. And I thought the 5 pillars, really, frame, who I want to be, where I'm going, and what I stand for.
And how you're going to get other people to that place as well.
No question.
So let's talk about those 5 for a second. And I want to share your whole journey story, with our listeners in a bit, but let's lay the foundation by talking about these pillars, and then we can reference them as you tell the story of, the highs and the lows of your own, life. So if I understand the 5 pillars correctly, the first one is to visualize and imagine.
Absolutely.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I think that's the genesis of being successful. You have to see yourself doing it first. You have to visualize the moments that you're doing it. You have to be there before you're there. And all the great things that happen in my life, and it's crazy, all the great things that have happened in my life, Peter, I visualize and imagine them first. And a lot of it derives from being a kid, starting, and having a balled up piece of paper and a trash can in the corner, and you're just shooting,
Right.
you're just shooting into, the waste basket, if you will,
Right.
trying to make shots.
You're doing a countdown, right? And you're going,
Yes,
3,
3,
2,
2, 1, and you
Yeah.
let it go and you knock it down. And then if you miss for whatever reason, he got fouled. He got fouled. The clock wasn't working correctly. There's another opportunity somehow, some way for you to take another shot. And so, I remember hitting game-winning shots as a basketball player. I hit some in high school. I hit one in college and a couple as a professional. And it felt like I had been there before because I had. In my mind as a kid, I had been there before. I visualize and imagine these moments. Same with, being a big-time high school player. Same with being a college player. Same with being a pro. I visualize and imagine myself in all of these great moments. And I think if you want to be successful in anything, you have to see yourself doing it first.
By the way, for those who are listening or watching, if you get a chance, go to YouTube or Google and put in Ricky Price, Duke versus Maryland, and you'll see like I don't know, 30 or 60-second clip of Ricky hitting the game-winning shot. I remember the energy level in that clip of you hitting that winning shot, and like you said, it's like you had already done it years before in your mind.
Absolutely. And that's key. I think this for basketball, it was for me, but I think it's key for life. And, visualize and imagine is a huge and probably one of the most important pillars of the 5 pillars to success. And
When you get young people who come to you for this kind of training and coaching, do you find that a lot of them have never done that? They're not aware of that concept?
yes. A lot of people think that things just happen because they happen. And for some people who are lucky enough, maybe that's the case. But, I really feel that if you want to do something, you have to, start in your mind thinking about doing it and how that looks, putting yourself in those exact moments. I mean, there's another visualize and imagine that I'm doing right now, and that's winning the lottery, where I visualize and imagine myself winning that $500 million lottery ticket. And,
You and a couple million others of us, we're all
right. Not to say it's going to happen, but if it does, I'll be prepared. I've been here before.
Yeah. And do you have exercises that you take the kids through, like to teach them how to use their imagination to visualize? Is there like a method to visualization?
Not really. It's just a matter of, me talking to them and asking and, telling them like, look, what is it that you want to do? Tell me about your goals. And once they do that, then you can break down, well, have you thought about yourself actually accomplishing that? Have you thought about yourself actually doing that? Have you seen yourself actually doing this? And if the answer is no, and immediately I'm like, yo, you gotta do that. You gotta see yourself in these situations, especially if you want them to happen.
Yeah, and for kids who've never done it, it's got to be a huge breakthrough for them to take their athleticism and then have a tool like this to focus that ability and take it to another level.
No question. I mean, it's imperative that that's the genesis of goals and aspirations is to visualize and imagine yourself doing them first.
I remember way back when Michael Jordan hit the winning shot playing for your arch rival, UNC. It's hard to say that in the same conversation with a Dookie, but yeah, that was the famous moment when he was a freshman and he hit that game-winning shot, and his team trusted him with the ball, with the clock running down, hit the winning shot, and the first thing he said in his interviews was he had seen that moment happen in his mind many, many times while he was growing up.
Listen, I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. The greats have been doing this forever. And some people are doing it to copy other people. Some people already have that built in. But, for me, there were so many things that I wanted to do as a child. And I would just imagine myself doing them. And a lot of those things came to fruition. And I honestly, firmly, and truly believe that the reason why those things happen is because I imagined them happening first.
Well, so that's kind of tool number one. And so you start with that, and then the second pillar is, I think, if I'm getting it right, you call it competitive spirit.
Absolutely.
And can you define that a little bit more?
Well, competitive spirit, I think, is what drives any athlete. As a basketball player, I was ultra competitive. I wanted to win at just about everything. Every sprint, every loose ball, every rebound, every defensive matchup, every offensive matchup. After practice, it's a dunk contest. I want to have the best dunk. There's a pass. I want to be I just wanted to win at everything. Then even outside of basketball, that carries over. If we're playing spades or dominoes,
Yeah.
or checkers, or
Yeah.
I know you go to Dave and Buster's and you're playing these games that they have. I just want to win. I'm so competitive in nature, and winning is what drives me. And some people have that, to an emphasis that is kind of unbearable. I think, like Jordan and Kobe, they were like that, where it's just, it's just
They hated
enthralled.
losing more than as much as they loved winning.
Exactly, exactly. And so for me, I always had a strong competitive drive. And I think,
Do you think that's pretty much a common uh, factor in most of the great athletes?
it should be, and it is. For everyone that I've talked to, everyone that I've seen interviews for or with, those guys said the same thing. They were driven by competition. They wanted to win at all costs, and they would do whatever it takes to win. And I think that's one of the starting points of being great.
Can you ramp that up in somebody, like if an athlete comes to you with talent, potential, but you don't sense that competitive drive in him, is there a way that you can, kind of ramp it for him?
Well, I think in training sessions, one of the things that I like to do, and I learned this from Coach K, who's a master at this also, was every practice was ultra competitive. He set the drills, he set the scrimmages, everything we did in practice bred competition. And so it felt like in a 45-hour practice during the season that it really felt like games were easy because our practices were so competitive. And then, you're competing against 8, 9, 10 other McDonald's All-American guys who are
Yeah.
just as good as you are. And what you get is a high level experience each and every day that becomes a habit for you. And so now when you get in game situations, every single aspect of the game, you're looking to compete, which is exactly what Coach was trying to do, to build his great Duke basketball teams. And I kind of took that concept and put it into training sessions where, I wanted to have my guys compete um, each and every drill in a training session to kind of breed competition because I knew that's what they would see in game situations.
I would think that's kind of almost a way to weed out people who just don't have the drive too, is they can't handle the intensity of of a competitive practice session, let's say, then they sort of, they drop off.
Absolutely. I mean, these are all the things you need to be really, really good in basketball, really, really good in life. You have to be willing to compete at just about everything. Everybody, especially we're here in North Carolina where basketball is king.
Yeah.
And, everybody wants to play basketball. You see a hoop on every corner. Kids are playing in AAU middle school. They have aspirations of making their middle school team, making their high school team. They want to go to colleges like Duke or Carolina. They want to play in the NBA. Well, if you're going to do that, you have to be willing to compete against everybody else who wants the same thing.
Right. So, 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 you, so, That's pillar number two, the competitive spirit. And again, either they come in with it. Sometimes they have it. Sometimes you have to foster it in them, I'm guessing. And and again, anyone who comes without it and then somehow picks it up is already making a huge breakthrough in their life. But then that leads to the next pillar, which is
Mhm.
perseverance and mental toughness, which I kind of translate as grit and resilience. Is that a good synonym for perseverance and mental toughness?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as a basketball player, I mean, that experience is definitely going to be there. You're going to have to deal with that at some point. And when I speak to different corporations and businesses and schools or whatever, that's probably one of the biggest things that I talk about is perseverance and mental toughness, because things are not always going to happen the way that you want them to happen. And when they do, what do you do next? And I think that's where a lot of people fail in sports, as athletes, and in life, because they can't turn the corner after disappointing things happen. They
Yeah.
can't understand how you fell flat on your face and that you have to get up, dust yourself off, and keep going. And as a basketball player, I had many of those instances. And one of the reasons why I was able to be successful in that realm was because, I was able to persevere, and I had, a level of mental toughness that was able to get me through.
Did you start out with that level of toughness, or did that grow in you as came under the tutelage of great coaches?
I think it happens naturally, just because of the failures that you're going to have in basketball. One of the great commercials, when we keep talking about Jordan, and that's not a bad thing if you're talking basketball. There's a commercial that he had, and he talks about, you know, all the misses
Oh,
he
yeah.
had,
Yeah.
all the game-winning shot misses that he had. And then at the end of the commercial, it talks about the misses are precisely the reason why he succeeds. And, this is perseverance and mental toughness. It's being able to, deal with the loss, the miss, the disappointment, the injury, and then retransform those, repurpose, and, turn it on and make it happen. And Jordan was one of the greatest examples of that in the history of basketball and all over sports.
And these skills we're talking about in terms of sports. When you talk to like corporate groups, if you're able to, you can apply.
They're so transferable.
Is that right?
And that's the word that I like to use, is that, sports and business, those skills are transferable. And if I hear another executive tell me that, they like to hire former athletes because they understand some of these transferable skills, if I had a nickel for every time, I'd be rich.
Yeah,
Or-
right.
Because they know that athletes have to deal with some of these, hit or misses, disappointments, competitive spirit, and some of the other things that we're going to talk about next. They're transferable skills that they'd like you to have when you enter corporate America.
And they are universals. These are universal principles, obviously. But like you say, it's, I guess, the arena, the sports arena is where a lot of these kinds of qualities are developed. And, through the game itself kind of helps you develop those. And I'm going to come back to this perseverance and mental toughness when we talk a little bit more about your journey. But let's move on to the other two pillars. And the next one on the list is hard work. It seems like a no-brainer, hard work. But you get kids who just don't get that.
Absolutely. I mean, nothing in life comes without hard work. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. And, every athlete, that I can think of, even if you had the talent, the measurables, and all those things, they spend a considerable amount of time working on their craft. And, when I think of hard work, the first person that comes to mind is a guy like Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
God rest his soul, who is notorious for being one of the hardest workers in NBA history. And this is a guy who already had the measurable 6'6", long, lanky. He had the athleticism, he had the basketball IQ, but he was a relentless worker. And as a result, he was able to accomplish, great things in basketball. And I think all the all-time greats in all sports.
Yeah.
One of the main caveats for them is how hard they had to work to get there.
And Kobe pretty much drove the rest of his team to work as hard as him. I mean, he made him crazy with how hard he was willing to work.
No question. I mean, to the point where it's kind of nauseating that you have a guy like this who is just irking you to work, uncomfortably more than what you want to. But, he expected that out of you because he knew that that's what it was going to take to ultimately win. And he knew he needed, 10 other guys to go along with him to share some of that same work ethic. And
You know who else comes to mind as somebody who had that work ethic is Jerry Rice, the great receiver for the 49ers. I remember because I was living in San Francisco when he was in his heyday, and they used to run articles about these workouts that he would put himself through during the off season that were so hard that eventually other players asked to join him because they wanted to be as good as him. And they would drop off. They couldn't keep up with him, but he just kept pushing himself and pushing himself.
Absolutely. In every walk of life. I mean, Jerry Rice, comes from a small school. He wasn't from a Power Five conference. He made himself into who he was. He had the speed and athleticism, but he was an incredible route runner. You can only get that by working on your craft and doing some of those things. And, there's so many examples from great coaches to great players, and they all say the same thing in hard work, the work ethic, the time spent. It's all there across the board for everybody, and your success doesn't happen without that piece.
And work ethic is a word we hear a lot these days in terms of sort of the younger generation. The older generation feels that there's not a strong work ethic being kind of growing within the younger generations. Are you seeing that?
I am. I am. And, a lot of people say, well, the old school guys are hating their old school. You guys had things different, but it's true. I think the work ethic and the level of work the guys are willing to put in was different, in my years and before than it is now. I think there's so many other options. These guys, the kids want to get on the sticks. They want to play these video games. I love video games. The social media is an issue. I see kids who want to scroll for hours upon hours upon hours on social media when you can take those same hours and you can spend time in the gym, working on your game. And so, one of the things that I ask players immediately is, look, we talk about your goals and aspirations. What is it that you want to do as a basketball player? And then the next question that I ask is, well, that's not going to happen overnight. What are you willing to do, for these things, to happen?
Yeah.
And, that's when the conversation gets a little rocky because, these same kids don't know what to do next.
Well, and again, it sort of separates the ones who are going to make it from the ones who just have the talent but never fulfill their potential.
Absolutely.
So the last pillar is, and this is a little bit harder, I think, to deal with. I think you call it confidence, which of course everyone says, yes, you got to have confidence, but that's a fragile pillar, isn't it? Confidence. I mean, how do you not only gain confidence, but what do? You see basketball players, they've missed 4 shots in a row. What happens to their confidence? It happened last night in the football game in the playoffs. All of a sudden, a couple bad passes, and it seemed like the wheels are starting to come off the wagon. How do you instill confidence in somebody?
Yeah, confidence to me comes from the work that you put in. For me, after seeing the ball go through the basket time and time and time again, I begin to feel confident, that I can do this. And the only way you can get confidence to me is practice and be put in situations and have some success. And I think that builds confidence. There can also be issues where people, instill and build confidence in you. Another thing that Coach K did was he was able to really build and instill confidence in his players. And those one-on-one sidebar conversations were always good for me because, he could tell me exactly what it is he wanted me to do. And then he would normally end with like, you can do this,
Wow.
you're the most qualified guy for this. This is going to be your game.
If he told you believed it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And after him telling you that, you want to run through a wall. And I do the same things with the kids that I train. And you can only get confidence by, putting the time and the work in and seeing the results. And I think through those results, it builds confidence for you.
It seems like
Yeah.
the first four pillars that we just talked about kind of lead to this point that if you can work through those pillars, then the next thing you can do is, then the confidence kind of starts to grow in you. It's like
Absolutely.
the force is strong within you kind of thing.
And you have to be confident. Are you telling me that, like, think about a tennis player or a track and field athlete in a sport that's an individual sport where it's just them. They can't lean on teammates. They can't lean on others. It's just them. You have to be extremely confident to be in those situations, to run 100 meters in front of the world, knowing that, 10, 12 other guys to your left, are trying to do the same thing.
Well, this is real. I mean, these are really good. The pillars are obviously make sense. They're intuitive, and and if you can instill this is awesome. But let's bring it into your own journey in your life, because you didn't just come upon these things, and you had to learn some of these things the hard way. You had your own moments of losing confidence. You went from being one of the top two or three high school prospects in the country, and getting invited to go to Duke and UCLA and all sorts of great programs. You were looked at as possibly one of the next, at least lottery pick players, to going through Duke, having some great moments and also having some challenges along the way. And by the time you graduated, you weren't drafted by the NBA, and you had to, kind of take a hard look at yourself. And can you talk a little bit about that journey and what it put you through, and how leaning on these pillars kind of got you through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Celebrate Your Wins, the book as a whole, is really a memoir about my career. It's really the blueprint, and yeah, that's it. And how I was raised, and some of the things that I went through. And as you mentioned before, I had so many successes early on, by being one of the top middle school players and high school players in the nation, going to Duke, and being on a short list of potentially being an NBA draft pick. And so when those things don't happen, you're kind of lost. You look at yourself in the mirror and you say, what happened?
Yeah.
But there's certain things and certain steps along the way, that if you skip, these things can potentially happen. You have to stick to your guns. And even though the 5 pillars are my 5 pillars, I wasn't always particularly good at them. I wasn't always
I know where you
implementing them. Yeah, when I should have. And that's another reason why I think this book is so important, because it's kind of a blueprint of what you should do and what you should do at all times.
Well,
Uh,
resilience was one of those 5 pillars, and mental toughness. And I'm just thinking, as I was reading the book, there was, the part of the book where all of a sudden, you know, you had an injury, you had an academic challenge at Duke, and things that set you back. You had, in other words, setbacks, and then somehow kind of set back your goal to become, an NBA star. Um, it was painful to read, frankly, and I'm thinking to myself, man, what must it have been for you to go from having years and years of being the king of the hill to then suddenly going up against other players who were just as good as you, who were then continuing on to fulfill some of the dreams you had. What was that like for you? Can you share some of some of the how you got through that?
it was difficult. I mean, I think in the early years it was tougher, because you have your goals and aspirations, you see yourself in a certain way, and then you watch your peers who are accomplishing some of the same goals that you are,
Yeah.
and then in some regards you're even better than they were. Like, how was he there
Yeah.
and I'm not there? And then you start pointing the finger and you start, making excuses. And that's another thing that this book, taught me as well, is that, there has to be a certain level of accountability that you have for yourself, for your actions, and the things that happen. And, I think sometimes things are just written of where are going to be. And sometimes you can kind of pave the way a little bit,
Yeah.
create your own space to make it happen. But at the end of the day, you have to make all these things and then have a little bit of luck. I mean, making it to the NBA is a huge, tall task. We're talking about less than 1% of the players who play in college are going to are going to make it into the NBA.
Many are called, but few are chosen.
Right. And that's a tall task already. And so, you have to look at all these things, but, you don't want to make excuses. You want to be accountable. And, I feel really good about my career. And I think I took it as far as I could, given the situations that I had. Could there have been a couple bounces that would have gone my way that would have made me maybe into a 10 or 12-year perennial NBA guy? Absolutely. But there also could have been situations where maybe I don't even go to college.
Yeah.
And I don't make it at all. So, I mean, there were some silver linings there and there were some great moments, but I feel really good about, where my career went, where I took it and how far I took it. And, minus a few things, I'm happy, with the way things turned out.
Well, I think that, yes, really speaks to this concept of resilience because, and this is something that so many young athletes don't realize. Well, during those early years when they're feeling invincible and they see only, the glory that lies ahead of them, that there's going to be setbacks no matter what path you take. Um, it's kind of like we talk a lot about pizza on this show, and one of the great pizza makers in America, Chris Bianco, talked about how it took him 16 years to finally make a pizza he was proud of. And suddenly he was like a superstar in the pizza world. And yet he says, but not all my pizzas turn out every good. You have to kind of have some kind of amnesia and go, okay, today's wasn't as good, but tomorrow it's going to happen again. I'm going to have another chance. Um, it's, and you can't give up. And I think this again goes to your pillar of perseverance, mental toughness, but it's not easy. It's easy to say, but it's not easy to just pick yourself off the floor and say, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going forward. And, I think if you can get that idea across to the kids who are coming to you, you're doing them a huge service.
No question. I mean, I think it's not just for basketball, but for life. There are a lot of people in life who think, who apply a career path and it doesn't necessarily go that way. And what do
Yeah.
you do next? And, these are the things, and this is again why I say, basketball in corporate America, basketball in business, the skills that you have to learn and have to deal with and have to be able to master are so transferable.
And it's such a fragile line when you were at the top of your game and you were starting for Duke, I think even in your freshman and you had a big sophomore breakout year, um, it looked like, the sky was the limit. What happened to kind of hit that wall or plateau, that caused you to not be able to keep taking it, to the next level and started to see some of the other players, the new players that were coming on the team that were maybe younger than you, taking your starting position.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing was, my sophomore year, I had a chance to leave and enter the NBA draft. And I talk about this in the book
Yeah.
as I was scared to make that jump. And so the troubles that I had my junior and injuries that I had my junior and troubles I had my senior year never happen if I leave as a sophomore, which leads me to my next point. The NBA is about who's hot. And when the time is right, you got to make the jump. The problem at Duke was no one had left early to go to the NBA from Duke. We had players
What
like
years were you playing there, Ricky?
95 to 98.
Okay.
So I'm coming off the heels of Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, and
Yeah.
Grant Hill.
Yeah.
Three of the players who were probably the best players to ever play in Duke history.
Yeah.
And they stayed 4 years. Obviously, all three went to the NBA draft, but after 4 years. Well, the problem is that times are changing. Things are changing. And now underclassmen are starting to leave early. Now kids are starting to get drafted out of high school. The NBA draft now is becoming about more potential than accomplishment.
Uh-huh.
And so I was right in the midst of all of that in the mid 90s. And I wasn't able to see those signs. And in 1996, which is probably one of the greatest drafts in NBA history, I was consistently on first round mock boards for the
Right.
NBA draft, anywhere between 18 and 30.
Uh-huh.
And so now, if I would have made the jump, I would have been a first round draft pick had I left my sophomore year.
Who were some of the other
Time-
players, just for perspective, some of the other players on that board?
Well, the number one pick that year was Allen Iverson.
Allen Iverson, holy cow.
So you got Ray Allen, you got Stephon Marbury, you got
Yeah.
Steve Nash. I mean,
Holy cow.
Kittles.
Yeah, a lot of people hand on
It was a monster draft.
Yeah.
And I probably would have been somewhere towards the middle, towards the second half of the top 30. But consistently, because of my play, I was there all year. But in my mind, I was scared to make the jump, thinking that I wasn't good enough to make the jump because my predecessors hadn't made the jump. And that wasn't really good on my part. It wasn't really good forward thinking. And I should have managed that situation better. And that was really mistake number one. And then mistake number two, obviously the academic trouble. Obviously I had some injuries. There was an NBA lockout. I mean, there were a whole bunch of things that kind of got in the way.
Life gets in the way.
Yeah, the NBA dream happening. And again, these are not excuses. I'm not pointing the finger or pointing blame. These are just the facts. And, these are the things and some of the things that I had to deal with, as a college athlete, navigating through a sophomore year.
But this is the point, really, of what you're doing now is that this is the more common story. This life gets in the way of the best laid plans of mice and men, and suddenly you have to pivot, you have to adjust, you have to especially persevere.
And that's why I told you, there were times when these same pillars I wasn't really that good at.
Yeah.
I didn't apply as good as I should have applied them. And this is the maturation, of a young man, is figuring out, where your pitch is, learning along the way. And these are some of the growing pains, that I had, in my early years in college.
Well, this book really is your journey. It's a book of the journey of a young soul, in search of purpose and meaning, and it happened to be through basketball instead of through pizza, like it was for us. Listen to Pizza Quest. But it's a similar journey, and it's a compelling journey with lots of ups and downs. Along the way, you had some, wonderful experiences. Also, you did get to play professional basketball and played all around the world on international teams and played in, I don't know, based on what I read in the book, it sounds like close to a dozen different countries that you played in. Since it is Pizza Quest, I'm going to have to ask you this question for all of our pizza fans: is you got to eat food all over the world and play in many countries. Did you discover any great pizza anywhere? And or what was the favorite foods that you found that you might not have ever known about had you not been, moving around the world?
That's a great question. One of the great things about being an overseas basketball player was I had a chance to sample, different cultures, different languages, different people, different foods, different cuisines, different time zones. I mean, everything was just so different than what I was used to. But I appreciated that because, had I not been playing basketball professionally over these places, I probably would have never visited these same places. And so I feel very fortunate, to have that happen. In terms of the food, I had a bad experience my first year. I was in a small country called Slovenia. Great country. It's right there nestled in the Adriatic area, Croatia, Austria, Slovenia. It's right there. And I never forget, we had, and this is in December. So I'm there. I get there in August, September, and we have a team dinner for during a Christmas team dinner. And so they rent out this nice restaurant. We're all there, and we eat. And one of the entrees was fish.
Yeah.
I like fish. I've always been a fish guy, a seafood guy. And so, but this fish needed to be cooked a lot more than it was cooked.
Oh gosh.
They served it to you, looked like it had been straight out of the lake that they found 2 miles, down the way. The eyes are still in it. The scales are still on it. I mean, they might have cooked it to just a couple minutes.
Yeah.
They called it a Slovenian delicacy. And just the look, the smell, the feel, I didn't feel good about it. So, my teammates are egging me on, you must try Slovenian delicacy, you'll love it. And so I take the first bite and it's not me. Second and third bite and I'm done. So, we have a great dinner, teammates, it's camaraderie, everything is cool. Get home later that night and my stomach starts bubbling.
Mm.
And it ends up being Montezuma's revenge. I remember being on the toilet with a bucket in my lap and I'm throwing up
Yeah.
and number two at the same time.
Yeah. Right. It's coming out both ends.
Coming out on both ends.
Right. Right.
And so ends up,
And it wasn't just here. You weren't the only one who got sick, right?
yeah, a couple other guys on the team got sick as well.
So it wasn't just the psychological, it was a real food poisoning situation.
Turns out to be food poisoning. I'm in the hospital for 4 days.
4 days. Wow.
Needed an IV. Well, that wasn't 4 days. It was about 2 days. But it was one of the worst feelings
Yeah.
that I had ever had. And so ever since then, I've always been conscious about what I eat.
Yeah.
And so that kind of ruined my cuisine experience.
You're really careful eater.
I was very careful. I would stick to stuff that I knew, and I would eat American food if they had it, fast food if they had it, because I knew it. And so I probably missed out on a lot of opportunities to have some good cuisine because I was so shook, by the food poisoning experience.
Well, but
I love
back in the college days, were there any, was pizza ever a part of your life or the life of the team?
Absolutely. I love pizza.
Did you have any favorite places you could share? Just shout outs for places that you remember that you have fond memories for?
Well, my go-to early on was always Pizza Hut. That was my favorite. They had this deep dish pan pizza that I absolutely loved.
No kidding, yeah.
And that was a special thing for me. Later on, Papa John's I thought was really good pizza, but there's so many great pizza places now.
Yeah.
Then, the European style and way that they make pizza. When I was in Italy, vacationing, I had a chance to, get some homegrown pizza there that was delicious. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, right.
And in the verbiage of pizza. And I love pizza. And to this day, a good pizza, anything with meat, sausage, pepperoni, the meat lovers,
Yeah.
that's my thing. That's my thing.
Do you have a place here in Charlotte, since we live in the same town, that you love that I need to know about?
There's a couple spots, Intermezzo.
Intermezzo, yeah, I know that place.
Yeah. Yeah, off of Central Avenue. They have a really good pizza there. You go to regular spots, your North Italias, you can get some pizza there.
Fires are together.
Blaze is not bad.
Well, you and I are going to have to, go out and get a slice somewhere. There's some new places opening that I'll share with you after off air, and we'll maybe one of these times we'll meet up for a slice. And
I would love to do that. I mean, you don't have to ever tease me with a good time for having the slice of pizza. So I'm with that.
I'll trade you because I'll share anything I know about pizza with you to hear more stories, more of your basketball stories, because as you know, I'm a basketball junkie and a huge fan, and you've had quite a journey. And so, I want to let our listeners know that the book is called Celebrate Your Wins by Ricky Price. It's a good read. It's really, you can't put it down. Basically, I read this whole book in like a day, and lots of stories, but lots of, I think, life lessons that you share. And for folks who have an interest in basketball, do you do the, the program itself here anywhere outside of Charlotte? Do you do the training, basketball training in other cities, or do people come to you?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's homegrown. I've been here, and so it's for the local kids that are here. I've been in situations where I've gone out and trained different teams in different areas. I've been down to South Carolina before. I've done some stuff at home in LA. So people bring me in to set up some drills and work with some guys. I'll do that. I've also dibbled and dabbled with training pros. Guys who are playing professionally overseas or attempting to, enter the NBA draft, or just already in the NBA and are conditioning and just, maintaining, their games in the off season.
Well, that's nice. Yeah. Can you for folks who want to look you up and check out your website or your book? Well, the what's the website for the program itself?
Yes, Game Ready CLT is our website. There you will.
One long word. Game Ready CLT.
Yes, the word
Okay.
Game Ready, which is the name of the company, and obviously, the pillars derived from the word Game Ready as well. CLT, obviously, we're in Charlotte. GameReadyCLT.com, and all the information is there.
And the book can be found on Amazon or any other booksellers.
Yes, there's also a tab on Game Ready CLT to talk specifically about, the book as well.
Good.
But yes, the book is doing quite well on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And we talked about this. One of the really cool parts about, this whole project was being able to do the audiobook. And the audiobook is on Audible and Spotify.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, that people
The audio
would it. Yeah.
The audiobook is actually something that I was able to narrate myself.
Oh yeah, yeah. You did your own narration. That's fantastic.
Yes, and that was really cool. And so we did our audiobook a little bit different. We've got music in the background. We've got, the sounds of life in basketball. It's really, really cool. It's a lot different than your normal audiobook. And I think it's definitely worth the listen.
Well, I'll get you out on this because we're in the middle of this season, the basketball season. Duke has another great team. I'm sure you've been keeping up with it. Any predictions on how you see the season, ending, and any national titles in the works?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is obviously a really, really good team. 18-1, I believe, is the record. And, this team could easily be undefeated based on how it's played throughout the year. I think this team will be there when it's all said and done. This is one of the top 5 teams in the nation that I've seen, but there are other teams that are right there. I think UConn is there. Arizona has a really good team. Michigan has a really good team. And so just to name a few, Florida is going to be there again, I have a feeling. And so it's wide open. And, I think the parity in college basketball is really good this year. And I think we'll see even more of that as we get to the NCAA tournament later in a couple months.
Well, we'll see. We'll maybe see you at the Final Four. Do you still get to work out ever with the players, or go on campus and play?
Absolutely, I have a great relationship with the program. I don't play anymore. I'll be 50 just here in a couple of weeks, and so I'll be celebrating my 50th birthday. And so I tell people all the time, there's definitely an expiration date on basketball. And so, for me, even after I finished as a pro, for recreation and to stay in shape, I was still hoop and playing men's leagues and hoop with some of the guys on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But, as time goes on, I mean, your body is saying one thing and your mind is saying something totally different. And so,
You're not even doing the local recreation games, because there's a lot of retired NBA players here that live in Charlotte. I heard they get together at some of the church gyms and things like that.
I mean, they might get together to play horse, but I know a lot of them don't get better to play anymore.
They're not sound of it.
Exactly. And I'll still shoot around with the kids sometimes. And, I'll play around. I may play a game of horse or two, but physically playing anymore, those days are done.
Well, if anyone's listening who wants to get their kids enrolled in Game Ready, check out the website, check out Ricky Price. And Ricky, thank you so much for joining us on Pizza Quest. We'd love to have you come